I'm just going to turn it over to my colleague Stephanie for our next conversation. Thanks again.
Hello again. So we've heard a lot about what civil society organizations, multilateral agencies, and governments can do with climate. So next, I want to talk to our next speaker about the role of philanthropy when it comes to climate. So I would like to welcome to the stage Andrew Steer, the CEO and president of Bezos Earth Fund.
Good to see you.
So the Bezos Earth Fund was launched in 2020 with an initial pledge from Jeff Bezos, your founder, of $10 billion over 10 years. Now that sounds like a huge number, but I'm going to give a stat that I'm sure you're familiar with, but maybe some people in our audience aren't. Just under 2% of the philanthropy dollars that go out every year go to climate mitigation philanthropy, and that's not even talking about adaptation. So that's, of course, a very, very small slice of the pie. So knowing that, I wonder how you think about, the impact of your giving, how you develop strategies, and how you try to encourage others in the sector to give to climate.
Great. Well, first, thank you, Stephanie, for being here. Thanks to Devex. This is the best, edgiest, most interesting forum here in New York. I'm really grateful. I subscribe to many journalistic outputs and so on. Nothing is more valuable than Devex. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're right. You're dead right on this. It sounds like a lot of money, $10 billion. It is to me and probably to you, but it's not in terms of the need. And so what we do is we try to make sure that every, $1,000 we grant to an organization, it has to do two things. First of all, it has to deliver whatever that organization is delivering, and obviously it would be delivered well, and we would work with them to make sure that's the case. But second, it has to be part of creating a movement, because the world is full of pilot successes and we can't afford just to do that. And so almost everything we do, we would say, right, if we're trying, as we are right now, to support indigenous people and conservation in the Congo Basin, which is very, very complicated. So you find some of the leading organizations that have deep, deep roots on the ground there, and we would support maybe 10 of them. We'd give them significant grants. They would be responsible for doing whatever it is they're good at. And in addition to that, they'd be part of a team that would work with us and others. So we could engage at the head of state level. We could engage with European bilaterals. We could talk to the African Development Bank president together, so that you start getting that kind of upward spiral. So that's the way we think about how do you make this $10 billion, which sounds a lot, go a long way.
So I want to ask you, because you talked about supporting like indigenous groups, local communities, and I know you were recently at the Africa Climate Summit. You announced nearly 23 million pledge to African restoration. And one question I have, because I know that, things like locally led, localization, trust-based are terms that are thrown out all the time. So when you talk about a locally led organization or group, what are you thinking about?
Well, landscape restoration in Africa is a great example. We believe, and probably you do too, that the restoration of land is one of the great investments. It's exciting. There are very few win-win-win investments out there, at least not as many as we like to think. This is one. You bring molecules of carbon dioxide that are killing people up there, bring them down to Earth through the magic of photosynthesis, and they become trees and bushes and crops and soils, and they bring resilience. They can double agricultural yields. They can, and by the way, they also help solve climate change. A whole bunch of things that are really great about them. But the right way to do it is not to bring in great industrial combines that will plant, a bunch of, not indigenous trees. Rather, it is to benefit from the tens of thousands of well-equipped local, could be NGOs, could be small businesses, could be farmers groups, could be cooperatives in Africa. So what we do is, we've now I think in the last year, dispersed $50 million for restoration in Africa. And that $50 million has gone to 200 different groups, every single one of them sort of local. And those groups each would work with maybe 1,000 farmers groups. And so you sort of get that effect. And so you've got to be serious about this, because you could say, my goodness me, where's the money going? You'll never be able to monitor this. Well, that's why you need really smart intermediating institutions. If you've got the Greenbelt movement in Kenya and other countries, they're actually very good at it. Go to the 1 Acre Fund, they're very good at it. 2 weeks ago, we were in Kenya going out looking at some of these projects. They're actually very good at working with local groups. And then above and beyond that, now, thanks to technology, we can actually monitor what's going on. It's incredible. I mean, we put $60 million into something called the Land and Carbon Lab with the World Resource Institute and others. We now can not only see virtually every tree in the world falling every 2 weeks, you get it down to 10 by 10 meters, but you can actually see new trees growing for the first time. And so every single project that we do now has little shape files, as they call it, that you put on this computer system, and it will tell you, wow, is it or is it not successful? And so we've got this sort of tension where you absolutely want to trust the local groups. They're in charge. We're not. It's their money. We've been privileged to be able to provide it to them. But at the same time, they want to be accountable. And so we want to be part of that accountability system.
So I had to ask, because you're talking about, I was actually going to ask you about accountability and measuring impacts, but you talked about that in the use of technology. But I also wonder if there have been some challenges based on what you've seen, if there are some lessons learned, maybe some things that did not work out that you think will shape how you do your grant making in the future.
Oh, I think, look, I've been in the business for a while, and the way I started my career was working in agriculture, originally in Nigeria and then in Java, working on landscape restoration there, basically local government led, citizens not involved, and, you know, mea culpa. That money was not well spent. A lot of it failed. And we need to be really honest with each other about that. Well-intentioned, not wicked, but failed. We now know actually what works. We actually know a lot more about the human heart and human psychology and local communities and how they work together and how they can mutually support each other. But that doesn't mean that every project will succeed today. And that's why you want this light touch, but scientifically rigorous accountability mechanism. You know, there's some people that say, you know, well, these local groups, we should give them the money and trust them because they haven't had much money and they don't have much capacity. And therefore, yes, that's absolutely true. And treat them with respect. Treat them with respect that actually have a grown-up relationship with them and say, actually, what are you trying to do? Can we support you? And actually, we can tell you. And the people that use these computer systems the most are the people themselves. They actually use their cell phones to know what's going on with the others that are around them. So we absolutely are willing to accept failure. I mean, and that's the, you know, people say, when do you need philanthropy? Well, you need philanthropy when you want to move quickly, when you're willing to take risks, when you're not afraid of, you know, some scurrilous newspaper article saying that money was lost, when you're willing to be bold. So that's what we have to do, recognizing that sometimes we will fail. Luckily, the evidence is things are going well.
So I know we don't have a lot of time, so I wanted to get to a question about UNGA and what this week means for you. Now, we talked about, of course, SDGs and all of that. That's what a lot of the attention is on this week. And you talked about Africa Climate Summit, and I know you're going to be talking about COP with our president and editor-in-chief, Raj. But what were your goals and what are your goals for this week? What do you think are some opportunities that you can accomplish, you know, goals you want to achieve? What might be, you know, something that will lend itself to your agenda for COP28? What's happened this week that inspired you?
Well, I guess there's two levels one could answer that. One would be, we've got very specific campaigns on AI for climate and nature, on alternative proteins, on smart, socially responsible carbon markets for the energy transition. And I could go on, sort of several more like that. But I think that the meta answer to your question is, we would like UNGA to be like the Africa Climate Summit 2 weeks ago. The Africa Climate Summit actually reframed the debate. And President Ruto and his other leaders that have now seemed to have come on board, they said, actually, the narrative needs to be modified. Yes, Africa is a victim. Yes, we need massive inflows of money for adaptation and resilience. And Africa is the solution. We have more land than anybody else. We have more sun than anybody else. We have more minerals than anybody else. And above all, we have more brilliant, bright, young, entrepreneurial people than anybody else. Be our partner and we'll be part of the solution. I mean, it was I don't know who was there in the Africa Summit, but if you disagree, say so. But I found it absolutely inspiring because we need a new narrative. And we've just got a stock take, which is massively disappointing. So what is the narrative? It could be, hey, let's give up on 1.5. And if you're giving up on 1.5, I'll give up 1.5. No one will do anything. Or it could be, actually, there's no need to give up on 1.5. There are amazing tipping points. And what the Africa Climate Summit did was sort of inspire us. I came back sort of really enthusiastic. That's what we want here as well. And we absolutely want it as we head towards COP28.
Great. Well, I'm going to leave it there. And I think that primes us up perfectly for our next session. You're going to be up here with Raj Kumar. But thank you so much, Andrew.
Stay here?
Yes.